better. Okay, now I'm going to read their bios, so in case you don't know everything about them. Short, very short, Ronni. Okay, I'll start with Jessie. Jessica Chapnik-Kahn is an Argentinian-Australian singer-songwriter, actor and writer. She's worked in theatre and TV, played in the bands of some of Australia's finest artists, and released 2 solo albums under the moniker Apollonia. She's the author of children's book Millennium Ants and poetry collection Madre, which was inspired by the birth of her son Lev. Jessica lives in Sydney and is married to musician Nadav Khan. She's happy to call Ronni her mother-in-law. Ronni Kahn is a South African-born Australian social entrepreneur and founder of the food rescue charity Oz Harvest. She's an advocate, lobbyist, and activist, renowned for disrupting the food waste landscape in Australia. She appears regularly in national media, serves in an advisory capacity to government, and is a keynote speaker all over the world. Her mission towards sustainable action is supported through close collaborations with some of the world's finest chefs, including Jamie Oliver, Massimo Bottura, Neil Perry, and Bill Granger. Ronni is an officer of the Order of Australia and was named Australian Local Hero of the Year in 2010. And in 2018, her journey became the subject of a feature film, Food Fighter,
I'm not
directed by Dan
yet.
Goldberg. So welcome, and how are you both feeling since the last time we sat here?
Well, first of all, can I just acknowledge that we meet on the land of the Gadigal people, but perhaps I'll do the acknowledgement that my little 3.5-year-old grandson did for me when we were walking through Bondi, and we didn't know what was going to come out of his mouth, and it happens to be this one's child. We were walking, and suddenly we were walking down Kalua Street and saw through the fence a surfboard that had been decorated in Aboriginal dot-like painting. Levi looked at that and then turned around. I was with Nadav and Levi, and he turned around and said, he went to the ground and he said, but now how did it? I've just forgotten. You do it.
I don't. It's on Instagram.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. He said, Safi, I want to acknowledge he started like this. He said, here is the land, and he bent down and touched it. And he said, these are the people. He said, I acknowledge the Aboriginal people of this land and pay my respects to all the Indigenous people and the Torres Strait Island people. But it came from such a beautiful place, and he connected it with those dots. So I too want to acknowledge our custodians of this land and pay my deep respect to their leaders, past, present, and emerging. And how are we feeling? I can't talk for Jessie. I'll talk for me, although she has spoken for me a lot. I'm feeling, the last time this is our second beautiful soiree with real people, which is really exciting because this has been a year of talking to screens and seeing myself and not seeing anybody else. So it's so fun to actually talk to real people. It is also after the video this monologue that went out. So prior to the book coming out, I kind of was just in fear and thought I'd be living under a rock. And then Jessie suggested we make this video, which then I thought I'll never actually put my head out again. But I'm actually now feeling really, the book is out. It feels like a part of me is gone and yet shared, and I'm getting such a beautiful response that it really feels good. Yes, I'm feeling very excited in the lead up to Christmas and a little break.
Yes, a little break.
And Jessie?
I feel good. I had a baby 10 weeks ago. So I'm like, wow, the world. I haven't been out much. And so it's very special. This is my second time out, really, So
with real people.
With real
as
people.
In not family
and
people.
of the book, I didn't really get to do the book came out a few days after my baby was born, so I sort of missed all the stuff. So it's very special for me to get to engage with an audience after sort of missing some stuff and getting to see it have its life, you know, in your hands.
Yeah, because a book has a life. I mean, it's written, it's pre-written, and I want to hear about how this all came about. I mean, we spoke about it a little bit last time, but I'd love to hear more, and this audience would love to hear it, I think. How does one decide to write a memoir and then co-write a memoir and then have their daughter-in-law write a memoir? And how does it happen and how did it go?
You know, in about my second or third year of Oz Harvest, people started saying, so you're going to write a book? And I never should say never, but I did say never then. Mm-hmm. Clearly one should never say never.
You actually asked me.
Then.
Yeah. And I was like touring, doing music, and I was like, no.
Anyway, I put it on hold. It went. And then felt like so much water had gone under that bridge and there was a lot happening, and I just felt that I had stuff to say. So many people were coming to me for mentoring and so many people were asking me, and I could see that they were missing something. They were kept thinking that what they really wanted was a life like mine, and nobody would want that. You want to have your own life. And I thought, well, that's one reason to write the book. And the other was I really thought I was going to write a very short book, like, you know, the ingredients for a delicious life. And a couple of people had come to me and said they'd love to write the book. And I was considering them. And I'm still not. Jessie thinks I asked her, I think
Ronni told a story last time that was really incorrect. She remembered it wrong. When we walked out of here, I was like, you know, you got that story all wrong, right? She was like,
did you have to tell everybody? So now you tell the story.
The story went.
Can you imagine what it was like writing a book with her?
The story goes that over dinner one night you said, I want to write this story and it's these ingredients, and the Dove and I, Ronnie's son, my husband, we were like, ingredients? Like, oh no, you know. She was like, well, you know, and the Dove was like, Jessie should write it. Jessie knows. And I was like, oh, and I was like, I'd had my babe, like my son, I was like maybe 1 year postpartum, and I'd just been with my little baby for a year, and I was like, what? Do something, like what? You know, and he was like, you should. So we started toying with it, said let's meet up and let's have a cup of coffee and talk about it. We had this massive interview, all this stuff came out, and you know, you were freaked, like, oh my God, is that the book? What, you know, because we didn't know what the book was going to be. Was it going to be life story? Was it going to be and then we had a fight. We had a fight, and you said, that's it, we can't let, what if this, you know, the book brought up something, let's stop this, you know, like, no, it's just too dangerous, family, and, you know, like, fine. And then a friend of ours rang you and said, Jessie's got to write it, get over it, it's going to work out, you know. And so then we said, look, why don't we give ourselves a 3-month trial, just in case, you know, and then the 3-month trial came and went, and we just went on and on and on and on and finished a book.
That's true. And you just kept saying, it's just coming out. It's just coming out. It's meant to come.
Yeah.
So you're right. That is what happened. Our friend convinced me, and I was terribly nervous. You can imagine.
Yeah.
I risked my son. Who's he going to choose, his wife or his mother? We knew what that answer was going to be.
And what surprised you most about Ronnie's story? And then, Ronni, what surprised you most about your own story? I mean, you've got a whole life there. So we'll start with you, Jessie.
There were so many things. I mean, delving into apartheid in South Africa, and God, that was like, I just was like, what? And this and that. I mean, I just, you know, and your memory, you were like, I think, like, we were calling Ronnie's sisters. Did this happen? Because that sounds crazy. Like, you know, trying to piece together this crazy upbringing, like, to me. And Ronni was like, it's all so boring. And I was like, do you understand this upbringing? Like, it's insane to me. Like, you know, so that was just a whole new thing. And I'd never really asked. I've had South African friends and never asked, you know. So it opened up my curiosity and my world and the writers I was reading and just everything. I think from the Oz, like I was quite so delighted and amused by all the bumbling at the beginning of the Oz Harvest journey. That was like, I was like, tell me more. Like I was just so like, and then what happened? Like it was so fun to hear those stories of this woman walking into board meetings and just being like, I don't know, I'm just going to do this thing. And I just having no idea how it worked. And then becoming Oz Harvest and her becoming, you know, the repurposing that happened there, because it began with such innocence and such chutzpah, you know, and I just loved that. I couldn't get enough of that because I thought, yeah, that's how, you know, like you think that to do something like that, you know, you got to know more or something like that. But she didn't. She just knew what she needed to do, and I just love the details of the beginning of something, you know.
Yeah, fledgling.
Yeah.
Ronni, what surprised you about your own life?
That it was worthy of a story. You know, when Jessie said, this is interesting, I said, who is going to want to read this? Because I just, you know, it's your life. You don't think that it's interesting. And each time Jessie was drawing more stuff out of me, I just worried that it, you know, that it wasn't worthy of a story.
And the South Africa stuff, how was it to talk about apartheid and things that, I mean, they're so ingrained in you, right? It's something you know deep, and then you have to tell it.
Yeah, it was really, actually, I honestly feel that Jessie was mining information because it's stuff that I'd taken for granted every part of my life. And, you know, you close off, you move on, you close off stuff, and Jessie was prizing it open. And it was quite painful, but it was quite invigorating in a way because it was sharing stuff. And what was fascinating was Jessie's reaction to the stuff that I was saying, because that validated in a way that it could be interesting, because if she was so interested in it, which was a little peculiar for me, but she was, and then, and so that's really how one thing led to the other. But the truth is also Jessie chose things to put in the book, you know, that I struggled with.
Can you share some of that with us? I mean, can you?
Well, you know, I'd mentioned my father's accident. I'd mentioned stuff that happened growing up. I hadn't really, there's this chapter around growing up in South Africa, everyone has a nanny. And you don't have to be wealthy, you don't have to be rich, you just have to be white. And if you're white, you had staff working for you. That was the reality because it was giving people jobs and sharing. And so in the book, the actual significance of my nanny to me, I hadn't really verbalized ever. I knew it was. I knew that intrinsically, in fact, that was such an unconditional love that disappeared out of my life. But it was really only telling Jessie and her pulling out more information from me that the significance of that to all the emotional patterns I probably had through my life came from that.
Yeah.
You know, so this was an opening and a revealing. It was a real reveal.
To yourself as well as.
Oh, to myself, absolutely.
And it was tricky to know, am I so curious and interested because you're my mother? Like, because it involves characters that I know.
Yeah.
Like, what was Nadav doing? And what was, you know, or is this really compelling? But I was pretty sure it was really compelling, you know, but I was, you know, I was never 100%, but it was like, no, Ronni, this is really special. Like, this is a big life. Like we all, I think if you dig in everyone's life, you can find all the pieces that are quite amazing, the resilience we all have with certain things that happen, and the courage and all of that. But I was just fascinated from the beginning to the end.
Yeah, I felt like the book really builds, and it's slowly building Ronni Kahn in a way, you know, but you can see where it starts. And I think the South Africa chapter, for sure, the childhood stuff obviously is where everything starts.
Yeah.
And it all,
But I think what's interesting, and I've heard Jessie say, you know, we certainly didn't write the book chronologically.
No,
You know, there were just things were just pouring out and stuff was happening, and then it was really Jessie's skill that created the arc of the book and how she built it, because quite honestly, I was just, the stuff was coming out, and then it was how we put it together that I think clearly seems to also resonate with readers, not only the content, but just it seems the way that it reads.
And I think when we talk about stuff, you'd be like, but that's not for the book. I'd be like, don't worry. Everything
I said, that's not for the book.
Is in the book.
And it all landed up in the book.
That was my way to calm it up. This is not for the book. Turning the record. Pretty most of it.
but there's a huge trust here. So
Yeah, in hindsight.
no, you knew.
No, I did. I felt if Jessie was willing for me to be seen in a particular way, then who else could I trust? I mean, if she, and the interesting thing is Nadav, my son, my son, husband, kept reading bits, and he was engrossed and thought it was great. So this was like so peculiar, you know, it was so, oh, okay. And he kept encouraging us as well, which made it, because nobody else had read anything and I didn't share it with anyone else.
No one did. No one read anything to the publishers. We just, I don't know why, you know, I didn't doubt it, I guess is why I didn't. I just, you know, if I'd been maybe slightly, I would have someone to read and tell me, but I just never did. I was just like plowing through and in the bubble of my own good opinion, you know, and that was just really fun. Yeah.
Now, we talked last time, and I do want to bring it up again, because the title, I do think a title of a book is incredibly important. And this is a great title. And I want to talk about how you came to the title, as opposed to, I mean, there's the word purpose and the word repurposed. And I want you to talk us through this choice of repurposed.
So I think, I mean, Jessie will answer.
No, I can't remember.
Neither of us. Each time we kept saying, now, was it you who thought of repurposed? Was it me? Did it both? Was it somebody else? But I think, look, the word purpose, I feel, is so overworked, overused, and has challenges. And we talk about that a little bit in the book. The irony of the word repurposed in connection to me is that's what I do all the time with the products that we collect. So when we sort of thought a repurposed life, and the truth is my life did become repurposed. I've always had purpose. You know, we all have purpose, whether it's to look after our children, whether it's to make money, whether it's to, you know, wake up in the morning, know you're going to work. There's purpose in everything we do. And it was only when I repurposed my life and focused on Oz Harvest that everything shifted. And that's when I think it just came together, that we looked at different names and nothing quite gelled, but somehow a repurposed life just seemed to work.
Yeah, we doubted it for a while.
Yeah, we did.
The publisher. We were like, I can't remember why we thought, no, we can find something.
We can do better.
There was something there, and the publishers were like, it's the title.
No,
it's right, you know, and we just were like, let's go with it. We didn't have anything else. So
that helps. Now, you've been called an accidental activist, a disruptor. I want to know, Ronni, what really drives you? What is underneath everything? I mean, I could go back and say, oh, growing up in apartheid with that much injustice would drive a person. Do you go back to that, or what is it? What's driving you?
Look, I think what drove me then, what has driven me always, have been different things, but there's absolutely no doubt that for the last 17, 18 years, this notion of actually checking in and asking the world what the world needs from me, not what I need from the world, fundamentally shifted me. And I think what drives me, when you start doing something for others and you realize that the giving is so much more enriching than the getting, and it becomes addictive. It absolutely is. It's like a drug. It's like a potion. And it's one of my staff said today that she's kind of limping to the end of the year. And I looked at her and I said, I totally get it for you. I said, I don't think I've ever limped to the end of anything. I don't even understand what it could feel like to limp to the end of anything, because I'm so energized. And so doesn't mean I don't get tired. It doesn't mean that things, sometimes do or don't get me down. But I'm so full that I wake up with gratitude every single day. And that seems to put some fuel in my veins that allows me to do what I do.
Yeah, I think one thing in the book that really sort of grabbed me was around grief, because you go through the different chapters and there's quite a bit of loss there. And not that everyone doesn't have it, because we all go through loss. But in this memoir, it starts with Florrie, the loss of Florrie, and that's the nanny. And then, the Yom Kippur War in Israel, that's 3 very close friends, family. And then, later on there's Joe. There's big grief.
Yeah.
But you get up every day and you're not limping to the end, as you say. And I want to know how do you deal with the grief and get on with the day?
Grief is very different from me now since Joe. So Joe's my daughter-in-law. She passed away. She was diagnosed on the 21st of July, 2015 with pancreatic cancer, stomach cancer, and died the 21st of September, 8 weeks later. But what she taught me then, so it was very different to knowing the grief that I felt earlier when my mother died. She died very young. When our friends died. Joe's death, probably on the back of the fact that for the first time in my life, I'd had a spiritual teacher. I'd gone through a whole and continue to go through a growth around understanding life and death. And Joe's death, she died with such grace, and it taught me so much about living and about dying, that her death, as I could all just talking about her and her loss, but her gift was the gift that she gave us by being with us, but also taught me so much about living and dying. And that has informed, so all the grief I felt before was very different to going through Joe's death. And I think we sort of express that in the book. Yeah. So, her death is enough also to inspire me to get up every day, because, living meant so much to her. She understood that we have to live with joy and bliss. And she certainly, 3 months before she died, before she had any inkling, she was interviewed and spoke about how you have to live in your joy and in your bliss every single day. And it was complete portent. I mean, it was as if none of us knew what was to come. But she shared that. And I think also when you know what it is you get up for every single day, and when you have been through something like that, really all we've got is now. Every single one of us. That is all we have right now. And when you live in the present, really deeply in the present, it informs how you live. So, you've got to be your very best you can be right here, right now. Because who knows if there's a tomorrow.
Thanks, Ronni. Thank you. I'm just going to let this person in, and I'd love to I've chosen a reading, and I think it's a good time to do it.
No.
Are you
No,
sure?
it's got to be your voice.
So I'm going to share something with you before I read this. A friend of mine who kept saying, yes, he's going to read the book, and yes, he'll tell me when he reads the book. He's kind of a very close friend, and I knew that I was going to get the honest to God truth from him about this book, whether he liked it or not, or whether I liked it or not, whether I wanted it or not. And so he had the book for a while, and I saw him and he said, so here's what I need to tell you. We decided, him and his wife said, we decided we were going to read your book this weekend. So what we did was we got in the car and we drove to visit someone 4 hours away, and we put you on Audible and we drove. And he said, we still had, that was the last weekend, and he said, we hadn't quite finished it. So yesterday we drove to the Blue Mountains and back so that we could.
That's so cute.
Isn't that cute, Yuri? So cute. And he said, the one thing I can say was, he said, did you have coaching about reading that book? I said, no, I walked into a studio. They said, here's the book, read.
But that was a real experience for you. I remember you posted about it when you had to do it.
Because it was the first time I'd read the book from cover to cover.
And
it was
that.
like, oh, I like this book. I cried. The sound guy cried. That was really the first time somebody else had heard the book. And he was like, he forgot to tell me when to turn the pages because he was just so busy listening, and he cried. And he said, this is, so it was the first validation I'd had from someone, and it was a male. And that was really important because the publishers, in a way, had kept sort of veering towards chick lit. This is not chick lit.
Three men here.
Exactly. I'm so proud. I'm so grateful to acknowledge that the men are here.
But also, don't you feel I know just from being in the poetry world that there is something different about spoken word, and when you say your own word, something else happens.
Oh yeah, it was like, really, gee, Jessie wrote this well.
Yeah, you came home and you were like,
I love the book.
The sound guy really liked it. I was like, yeah, shocking. And I really, it's good. I was like, yeah, cool. It took 2 years to get her to be like, I think it's good. I was like, yes, Ronni. It's good. It's a good life.
It is a good life. Okay. Can you do, I think the chapter's quite short, so I think we should do it all. There's photos.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. This chapter's called Repairing the World. My new food rescue work brought lots of opportunities. One of the skills I needed to cultivate was speaking in public, because I was being invited to share the story of founding Oz Harvest to businesses and social groups on a regular basis. Aside from the little pep talks I'd given in my network marketing days, I hadn't done any public speaking. It was exciting, but a huge leap. When I was 15 years old, the headmaster of my high school encouraged me to consider running for school captain. The catch was that in order to be considered, I had to give a speech at school assembly. After I got over the shock that he even thought I was capable of being school captain, I said no, because I felt I could never give a speech to 800 people or to any people. I chose not to do it. It was just too terrifying. That kind of thing was for special people. And at the time, I didn't feel there was a special bone in my body. But when I was 51, I stood up in front of a group of strangers and gave my first public presentation. It was a simple, short talk that took place in a regular Sydney office on a regular workday, but it was deeply significant to me. It was the first time I'd had something to say that felt meaningful and that was my own. The things I wanted to say felt bigger than my terror. It's hard to believe that these days. Talking and sharing in public are what I love most about my job. They are how I connect to people from the heart. My 15-year-old self is still completely incredulous. As the public speaking part of my life took off, the impact of what I was saying and sharing became really important to me, beyond the fact of having started Oz Harvest. I was trying to make sense of what I was doing beyond rescuing food. I knew there was more at work here. Strangely, what came flooding back to me as a kind of rudder on this very new ship in this very new sea were the lessons I'd received at Habonim, my childhood Jewish youth movement, more than 40 years earlier. In particular, the idea of tikkun olam, repairing the world, came sweeping back into my consciousness, a concept that had felt so unattainable in apartheid South Africa was now within the realms of possibility. I felt that the underlying purpose of Oz Harvest was to right a wrong, the wrong being throwing away food, the right being placing it in the hands of those who needed it, ensuring resources for vulnerable people in our community, and fulfilling a moral duty. Tikkun Olam was starting to make perfect sense to me. What I learned over the years from different books and teachers was that Tikkun Olam was never only applicable to social activism. It goes without saying that we will all hopefully choose to do our bit when there is an injustice in front of us. This is so important. Oh, a whole bunch of pictures. But Tikkun Olam is a subtler process. It can be a way of life. It is the slow, precise, modest practice of living our lives with awareness and harmony. It is an intention. These efforts, no matter where you live or how personal or how seemingly small they are, can be the ones that change the world. And when I say change the world, I really mean that every single act we participate in reverberates. Everything is connected. If we intentionally consider our next door neighbor today, or feed and bathe our kids, or feed ourselves nourishing food, we are hands down participating in life-giving acts that bring harmony in one way or another to everything. This is how we repair the world. I like to think that any time we do something in the name of goodness, every time we do something that follows our most simple truth, it affects everything around us. It's in the way we treat our children. It's in the way we treat the bus driver when she or he takes us to work in the morning. It's in the way we treat our co-workers. It's in the way we run our businesses and the way we choose to think about our employees. It's an accepted idea that our business is there so we can make money. But couldn't we do the same business with the intention of making money and making it a vehicle for good? This is possible in so many ways. It doesn't matter what your role is or what level you are at. You don't have to wait until you are promoted or until you are the boss. You are the one who knows about your work. Who would be better equipped than you to know what needs to be done, changed, tweaked, created? Trust your observations, your experience. When corporations ask me to inspire their staff, or when people I talk to want something that I seem to have, I say, start exactly where you are. This is how Oz Harvest began. It began with my observation, my lived experience of knowing my work from the inside. It began with a simple intention of doing something good. Whether you are a child or a student, or an artist or a businesswoman or an activist, or a stay-at-home dad, or an accountant, or a retired person, we can all be involved in Tikkun Olam. It recognizes that we are each part of a collective and that we each have the ability to bring harmony through our actions, through our work, and in our togetherness in big and small ways. Though really, that means in recognized and not recognized ways, because it's all big. Tikkun Olam is such an exciting idea and it really inspires me. Changing one thing in someone's life completely motivates me. And that change in turn changes me in new, surprising ways. It's one of my favorite parts about my work and about life, hands down. It's so powerful. And I hope that Oz Harvest is a beacon for that mindset, the mindset of consciously participating on a daily basis in bringing peace and harmony to ourselves and others in whatever way we can. Through this process, we continue to perfect our world. This is our natural process as human beings. Tikkun Olam is that evolution. Once I heard something beautiful. I don't remember where and I don't remember when, probably from a rabbi, but it was along these lines. There are two ways of viewing the world. We can see it as broken, and from that view, it needs the rather urgent work of repair. Or we can view the world as perfect in its imperfection, so it doesn't need repair, but rather participation through living and playing a role in that balance. The catch is that perfection is often hidden. Perfection is hard for us to see as humans. At first glance, our many societies and our planet look to be a mess in so many ways. But what's so beautiful is that by participating in restoring the balance, as though by some alchemical miracle, our eyes begin to perceive the perfection of the world in all its glory. It changes us and it changes the world naturally. Harmony happens naturally. Tikkun Olam is about participating in that state of harmony.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. Now, I'm just checking the time. I have more questions, but I want to give the audience a chance. Does anyone in the audience have a question, or I'll just continue? Don't be shy. Go on, Deb. Okay, Deb.
You mentioned Ronnie in the very beginning when you were talking about Liv and his beautiful
Acknowledgement.
Yeah.
You mentioned our teacher, about our teacher, and I was thinking, I wonder who your teachers are, who that teacher you were alluding to, and other teachers.
Yeah. So 18 years ago, I was introduced to a teacher in India, a very simple but extraordinary human being. You know, in India, there are many, many gurus. The notion of a guru is very big in India. And I share in the book how we met this teacher, but that's who I refer to when I talk about that teacher, whose message ultimately is go out and do good, serve, be of service to others. And I met him just as I'd started Oz Harvest. And I truly believe that the teachings I've learned from my teacher, Amma Sri Amma Narayani, have been the fuel under the wings of Oz Harvest, because that's the spiritual teacher that I refer to. And of course, through my life, I've met many precious people who continue to teach lessons to me. But that's really who I call my guru, my teacher. And in a way, it has infused all of our lives. Yeah.
Yes. What's your name?
Justine.
Justine. Hi.
Was there, I haven't read the book yet, but was there a specific spark that set you on the Oz Harvest path? Was there something that sort of deliberately said that's the business I'm in?
Yeah, there definitely was. I mean, my business life prior to Oz Harvest was in the hospitality industry. So I ran an events company, and through that business, on a daily basis, I was creating waste, but never considered it that, didn't understand that. Through when you put on an event, a beautiful way of connecting people is through food. So all of my events had food, and it was a way of showing abundance and generosity, and that my clients were very successful. And so for years, I was creating lots of food. Being ethnic, my tables groaned because I didn't want anyone ever to have to go to Macca's on the way home after an event of mine. I always wanted there to be enough food. Until I reached that point that suddenly there was a particular event, and I don't want to go into the details because if you are going to read the book, it is in the book, that triggered this notion that I needed a solution. And in a way, that is a lesson for all of us. Sometimes we come across a problem in our daily life and we say, oh, why doesn't somebody fix it? In my case, I was that somebody. I chose to do the fixing, but all of us might have an opportunity in our own lives. But so there, yes, there was a story, and there is a big story around that. So I hope I leave you with enough curiosity to want to read the book.
Yes, so what's your name?
Nikki.
Nikki, hi.
Hi. Did you draw any inspiration from the poverty in South Africa, or you had immigrated so far away that it didn't actually feature?
No, I think one of the main reasons for starting Oz Harvest here was the guilt that I left South Africa and never did anything. It definitely was a driver in some way. And it took me 16 years of Oz Harvest to get Oz Harvest South Africa up and running. And I can share with you that this week I got a message that they just delivered through COVID their 3.5 millionth meal from Good Food That Otherwise Went to. So that's very precious, and absolutely subliminally and overtly leaving South Africa. You know, Australia benefited from what I didn't do there.
Yeah, can we go?
So
It's Tammy.
previous, I'm Tammy, sorry. So Ronni, was there something like, has there been something like Oz Harvest in South Africa before? Because I mean, clearly there's such a need, or is Oz Harvest like the forerunner of food waste? And
It's really the forerunner in the way that we do it. There is an organization there that had started doing something similar, but not really the way we do it. Yeah. So in a way, it is leading the charge in South Africa now too, and will be the equivalent of Oz Harvest here in terms of being the leading food rescue organization. Yeah.
Are you expanding anywhere else?
So we're in the UK, we're in New Zealand. Just taught someone in Japan. So Japan Harvest is actually just
That's cool.
opening, and yeah, we get calls all the time. Yeah. Our free supermarket. Yeah, we just opened our second one in Waterloo, which is really a very precious place. You know, I again, you think of Australia today with the abundance and the richness that we all experience, and I'd asked our branding guy to please go to the supermarket just because I need it. It needs tweaking, just making it feel a little more great inside. And he called me from outside. He said, I can't go in. He said, I've driven twice around the block. He said, Ronni, there are queues round the block. He said he was so overwhelmed, Vince. He was so overwhelmed. I mean, he pulled himself together and he went in. He said, it's just, unless you've seen it, you can't believe it. So, yeah.
How do you manage? Do people
So
take what they
very,
want, or
so the supermarket, the way the supermarket works, it's a take what you need and give if you can model. And it's very much like personalized shopping. Anybody can go. We don't register, we don't, it's
No
anybody-
background checks. It's
no
just,
background checks. Just because of COVID now, we are taking a phone number if one has, or details, just because to be COVID safe. And it's like a personalized shopping experience, although this supermarket is a little different from our first one. But you do walk around and somebody's with you, a volunteer. It's all manned. It's managed by a staff member, but the people on the floor are volunteers who help. And we help people shop. Hi, what's your name? And so it becomes a very personal experience. We get to know people. And
there's a chapter in the book about the supermarket.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That I'm just
There
saying because
is.
it's really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is quite a precious place.
Anyone else? Okay, then.
Sorry. How difficult is finding the balance between running a business and paying staff and with expenses vis-a-vis money going directly towards the charity? How difficult is that to manage?
So since I'd never started a charity and all I'd ever done was run a business, I don't see any difference between what I'm doing. What I'm doing is a social business. So you need the best people because the impact of what we do is so enormous. So obviously our salaries are nowhere near the corporate world and our salaries are so much less. But people come and work for Oz Harvest because what they're looking for is, most of them have tried to escape the corporate world because money isn't what drives them, but purpose and meaning is. So there isn't a balance. The impact is what drives what we do. And the more, each time I create a new program is, will this have the biggest impact? How will it affect? Will it stop food waste? Will it stop hunger? Will we be able to do something significant with it? Then it's worth investing in. Then I need to go and find the money to make that happen. So right from day one, it never occurred to me not to pay staff. I knew that I couldn't run a transport and logistics company with a volunteer driver force. If the Hilton Hotel said, come and fetch food now, and I've been a volunteer. There've been days when I was due to volunteer that I called at the last minute, said, sorry, I'm not going to make it, without even thinking about the ramifications. So I knew that I couldn't rely on a volunteer force. So we have paid staff. And, so often in this world, in this charitable world, you have people who say, I don't pay for overheads. Well, I'm doing government work. I'm doing the work that needs to be done in the best possible way. And when funders say to me, well, we won't pay money if you have too many staff, I say, well, then don't come and invest in Oz Harvest. Don't give your money somewhere else. But I'm going to have the best people so that I can have the best outcomes, so I can actually put ourselves out of business. I didn't create this to be the biggest. I want us to get out of business, to solve the problem of hunger and to solve the problem of food waste. And we working hard on both of those, both sides of the scale.
And where do you think you are at, actually?
So where we're at is we've just literally put a stake in the ground around what we want to achieve in the next 3 years around halving food waste. So we've got our government has committed to halving food waste by 2030 because of the work we've done and getting them to commit. And now we're amplifying all efforts between now and the next 3 to 5 years to make that happen at all costs, because somebody has to, as well as, again, upskilling vulnerable people. Our education programs have been ramped up, and we're looking at, again, how we all have to shift and change our behavior around the value of food. And until such time as we do that, because we are in business and we are the people and we run households and we do shopping, and supermarkets put in supermarkets what we buy, So until such time as we shift our behavior. So we're looking at all the different things we can do.
And the awareness now around climate change I mean, this wasn't something that you necessarily thought the connection initially.
Didn't see that at all, but 17 years ago, nobody was talking about
No.
that. And so, so it's absolutely amplified, and COVID has amplified
Right.
that actually, because we've had time to sit and think about the kind of world we live in. And, you know, when the world stopped and we stopped hearing aeroplanes and you could see the Himalayas. And yes, we've all shifted back very quickly, certainly here, and the rest of the world is still struggling. But there is stuff to learn, and there is, you know, hopefully the collective pain we went through will have benefits to our future.
I'm going to ask one last question unless someone else wants to.
I'm
Okay, so.
actually curious to know what Jessica's going to write next.
Oh.
What's your next project?
I'd love to write another poetry book.
Oh, yes.
I've got one cooking, but it needs a lot of elements to come together. I feel like there's a few things I'm interested in, but I sort of feel like books, you don't choose the book that you want to write. It kind of happens to you. It chooses you. So I don't actually, I'm in like Babyland, and with my last, when I had my son 4 years ago, I was writing poetry all the time, not for a book, just because it was my way to experience him and myself in the postnatal blur. It ended up becoming a book.
It's very beautiful book. It's called Madre. And
Yeah, that was so
gorgeous.
special to write in that time with such just innocence. But I haven't written at all in this pregnancy time. There's been other things going on, and I guess I was sort of finishing this. It felt like there was this other baby to fully birth, you know. So there's a few things, but I have no name.
But it's interesting because Jessie, one of the things Jessie kept saying was, this book is writing itself. You know, that's through this book,
Yes,
A Repurposed
I definitely
Life.
had that experience. But perhaps that's when you know you're writing what you need to write, I think. I don't think I definitely couldn't have written the three books I have written. I couldn't have written if I felt I was like, oh God, I've experienced that in music. I've experienced that in act. I've experienced it in lots of different realms of what I do. But with writing so far, it has been really lovely to have chosen things that felt sort of, in this case, it was in someone else's voice. So it was sort of like a channeling that I had to put myself in the space of channeling, because it wasn't meant to be my voice, you know, it was Ronnie's voice. So that was, apart from the writing and the craft, a really cool experience to just place myself at the center of something that just required absolute space, you know, in myself. I had ideas of what I didn't want Ronnie to sound like, you know, but I didn't know, not because she sounds that way in the way that people could perceive it or something like that. And I loved learning through writing this that it's not really, with a memoir at least, it's not really about how you write, but it's about how you listen, you know? And I just loved listening to Ronnie and then listening at my desk, you know? It was like this practice of almost meditative, because I don't think if I'd been like, right, how am I gonna, you know, and Israel, and if I tried to piece things in a way how I normally would make something, I think, I don't know, I don't think that would have worked or been the piece that I wanted to make, or that the piece that wanted to be, because I feel like in a way it ended up being, you know, that's what happens when you make things. They end up having a life of their own. You had ideas. They don't know, you know, like the title. We can't even remember. It's like, that's the title the book wanted to have. You know, at some point we were like, no, we can do better. It's like the book was like, this is my title, you know. That's what happens. And it's really beautiful to just become that sort of like a vase. You just sort of receive the flowers,
Mm.
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, did you produce that video? of Ronni?
Yes.
Oh, that was
Oh yeah, we played that last time.
Thank you.
Oh, should have played it. Got everyone crying at the very start.
Yeah.
Including me.
Yeah.
Very-
I'm gonna got one question
Yeah.
before we wrap up. I love the chapter, and you'll all read it if you haven't read it, Tennis Strings. I thought that was a very important chapter. And it's basically, without telling it too much, but Ronni sort of mentors someone, and it doesn't go exactly as the mentee might have thought. And it's a really interesting chapter, and I loved how it was written. I loved how that was put in and included. So I just wanted to end this night, Ronni, with not what you say to people to inspire them, but how do you inspire people? And how do you take on that role now? And what are your like ingredients for being a great mentor?
So I think if I knew and was conscious, this notion that I inspire anybody is still so. I do know that I have a gift. I have a gift. I've been given a gift. I just am grateful for what it is that I have. So I've never set out to inspire a single human being, nor each encounter when anybody comes to me to be mentored, it's about me listening to hear what it is that they are looking for. It's got nothing. All I can do is listen. And really, I mentored somebody yesterday, and not on purpose, she had booked me in to ask if I could help her with the organization that she had set up. And I'll just give you an example of the session, because she spoke and spoke and spoke. And I turned around and I said, look, all I can really tell you is what I've heard. And I'm not hearing what it is. What is it that you want to be bringing to the world? I still don't understand. You've spent 25 minutes telling me about your organization. So I understand that you've got this skill and you've used that. Just tell me, just tell me from your heart. Just tell me, what are you trying to do? And it was hard for her. It was really hard for her, but she had waffled around about how this was going to make this difference in the brain and the this and the that. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm confused. Just share with me, tell me. And so then she just said, well, I learned, I know. And it just like popped out. I said, that's what you need to be telling other people. You don't have to. And so it's really just each person is individual. But the most important thing is to look in the mirror, not to look at my life, not to look at your life, not to look at what you've done, but to say, what is it that brings me joy? What is it as a child that I loved? What is it that I have got to give? And if you don't know the answer, that is just fine. Just keep doing. It's not something we can buy off a shelf. It's not something that you can get from somebody else's life. And nobody has to strive to be me or anybody else. All those lives we look at that we think are so extraordinary, trust me, underneath each and every one of those is the same shit we all deal with. And some of us have just stumbled and bumbled into being where we are. And that just seems to be the best way to get wherever it is you go. Some people know exactly and plan it, If I think about my other son, at 10, he said, I am going to be a musician. I'm going to be a lawyer and a musician. He went to law school, and in fifth year law school, he gave it up and said, that is not who I am. I am a musician. So, you know, he knew always, or he knew that through music was how he would connect to people. How very fortunate. Not everybody knows that. But there isn't a time frame on when you can do that, you know. I'm old when I discovered this. I'm not old. I'm just biologically old. But as Levi says, Lev, my little grandson, says, keeps saying to me, he's a little, at the moment, he's very much into Safi. You're just a little bit old. You're not old, right? You're just a little bit old. I said, yeah, Levi, just that teeny little bit old. But the point is, it can, you know, there's an 11-year-old who this week sent me 3 pairs of earrings. She'd seen me. She made yellow earrings. She's sold hundreds of pairs of earrings. She's raising money. Now, who knows what that kid will be? Seriously, I mean, at 11, I didn't know anything. I didn't think about anybody else. So, you know, it's a different world and we're all different. And all we need to do is look at our own gifts and let them percolate, let them nurture. Sometimes they'll come out this way. Sometimes they'll come out that way. And we just don't know. And we don't have to know, you know.
I know that you have something to give to someone.
Oh, yeah.
Which kind of goes on the tail end of this question.
Yeah, it does. So for those of you who haven't read the book, or for those of you who have, the afterword of the book has become a very important thing that I share with people, because it seems to give people permission to be who they're meant to be. So I'm going to share with you the afterword, even though you'll read it again, but I read it 100 times because I love it each time, and every time I share it, I love it. So it's a quote that I heard from Amos Oz, who was an Israeli author who passed away a couple of years ago. He was the moral compass within Israel, the voice that everyone trusted, and his death was a huge loss for the country. He was an author. He'd written 46 books, wonderful books if you ever want to read him. But this is how the quote goes. In the event of a conflagration, we as human beings each have 3 principal ways that we can behave. A conflagration such as an enormous fire. So option number 1 is to look at that fire and run away as fast as we can and leave those that cannot run to burn. Number 2, we can write an angry letter to the newspaper demanding that the people responsible be punished. Or number 3, we can run and find a bucket. And if you cannot find a bucket, find a jug. And if you cannot find a jug, find a teaspoon. Because all of us have a teaspoon. And I know a teaspoon is tiny and the fire is huge, but there are millions of us. And if we all use our teaspoon, we can put out that fire. And so I'd like to create the order of the teaspoon, where we all walk around with a teaspoon on our lapel or in our ear, so that we know and remember that we are part of the order of the teaspoon and have to use our teaspoons every day. So will you all please put your hands together like this? Will you look inside your hand? Because inside your hand is your metaphorical teaspoon. And can you take your hands and can you put them to your heart? And can you put your teaspoon in your heart so that it's there for you to use every single day? Be it for a tiny weeny little action, which will grow to a big one, but use your teaspoon every day. And I do have a teaspoon. So if somebody would like a real teaspoon, now I generally have slightly prettier repurposed teaspoons that I find in op shops, etc. But this is a repurposed teaspoon from Gertrude and Alice, because
A secondhand bookstore.
a secondhand bookstore that's all about repurposed books. So if anybody would like a real teaspoon to be the memory for them or the call to action for them, This is your opportunity to be brave and courageous and come and get it. And the first person who stands up and comes and gets it, gets it. So there is your teaspoon. Use it well. And I will check in with you to make sure that it's being used well. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, everyone. Please thank Ronni and Jessica.
And thank you to our Zoom people. Let's give a wave to our Zoom.